The breaking dawn. Senator Relis couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in his core since being awakened by his attendant Dro. The words still echoed in his mind, "The humans have broken containment." As his skimmer approached the great armillary, he noticed other vessels converging on the massive structure, their lights cutting through the purple-tinged darkness of Morani's night sky. The great gates loomed before them, ancient monuments to the Empire's power and technological advancement. Each gate stood over 1,000 meters tall, their surfaces etched with circuits that channeled the psychic energies of the Scion escorts. These weren't mere doorways, they were symbols of the Empire's authority and the strict order it maintained throughout the galaxy. As Dro guided their skimmer to a landing pad, Relis observed the unusual activity around the facility. Normally, the gates operated on a strict schedule, with careful coordination between worlds. Tonight, all 12 gates were active simultaneously, their surfaces shimming with barely contained energy as they pulled in senators from across the Empire. "Senator," Dro's voice quavered slightly, "I've never seen all the gates active at once. The power requirements must be enormous." Relis nodded, his forearms adjusting his ceremonial robes as he prepared to disembark. "Indeed. Whatever has happened with the humans must be severe enough to warrant such an expenditure of resources." The humans. They had been a peculiar case from the start. Most species were approached by the Empire only after achieving specific milestones: global peace, mastery of particle physics, and development of sustainable energy sources. But humans had been different. They were discovered accidentally during a routine survey of supposedly primitive worlds, and what the Empire found had deeply disturbed them. While still locked in conflicts between their nation-states, humans had already achieved spaceflight. They had split the atom without first achieving world peace. They had begun to harness fusion power while still burning fossil fuels. They defied every pattern the Empire had observed in its 50,000 years of guiding species toward civilization. And so, the containment protocol was enacted. The Empire established a quarantine zone around Earth and its solar system, using their advanced technology to prevent human vessels from venturing too far into space. It was meant to be temporary, just until humanity sorted out their internal conflicts and reached the proper developmental milestones. That was 30 years ago. Relis and Dro approached the nearest gate, where a Scion escort waited. The being's silver skin rippled with exhaustion, but they maintained their position. The psychological toll of transferring so many minds across vast distances was evident in their trembling limbs. "We thank you for your service," Relis said formally, bowing his head in respect. The Scion's voice whispered in their minds. "The Emperor awaits. Please, step forward." The familiar sensation of mental displacement washed over Relis as the Scion began the transfer process. His consciousness separated from his physical form, held carefully in the psychic grasp of the escort. For a moment, he existed as pure thought, aware of the vast distances being traversed in an instant. When his awareness returned to a physical form, Relis found himself in the grand assembly of the Imperial Court. The massive chamber, normally orderly and serene, was in chaos. Hundreds of species representatives were already present, their voices creating a cacophony of different languages and tones. Some floated in anti-gravity fields, others stood on specialized platforms, and still others swam in contained environments suited to their unique physiologies. Above them all, on the Emperor's dais, sat the current ruler of the Empire, a being so ancient and powerful that looking directly at them was impossible for most species. The Emperor's form shifted constantly, a swirling mass of psychic energy contained within a ceremonial shell of living metal. Relis felt a gentle nudge at his side and looked down to see Dro pointing toward their designated section. As they made their way through the crowd, fragments of conversations reached them. "Broke through the quantum barriers. Impossible. Their technology isn't advanced enough. 3 colony ships, already beyond the Oort cloud. Weapons we've never seen before." They reached their seats just as a thunderous psychic pulse silenced the chamber. The Emperor was ready to begin. Esteemed members of the imperial court, the emperor's thoughts resonated within every mind present. We face an unprecedented crisis. The humans have not only breached our containment protocols but have done so in a way that suggests they have been aware of our presence for years, perhaps decades. A projection appeared in the center of the chamber, showing 3 massive vessels of human design. Their construction was unlike anything in imperial records, a fusion of technologies that should have been impossible for their level of development. These ships, the Emperor continued, launched simultaneously from different points on Earth's surface. They used a form of propulsion we have never encountered before, something that appears to bend local spacetime without accessing higher dimensions. Our barrier systems were useless against it. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the assembly. The Empire's containment technology was based on fundamental constants of physics. For the humans to simply bypass it. But more concerning than their escape, the Emperor's thought voice grew darker, is what we've discovered about their true level of technological advancement. We believed we were containing a primitive species. We were wrong. Evidence suggests they have been systematically concealing their progress from our observation posts. The projection changed, showing images that made Realis's blood run cold. Hidden facilities deep beneath Earth's oceans. Massive construction projects concealed within mountain ranges. Entire cities built underground, invisible to the Empire's scanning technology. For 30 years, the Emperor said, they have been preparing. The question before this assembly is, preparing for what? Continued. The chamber erupted in voices and thoughts. Realis sat back in his seat, his mind racing. The humans had not only managed to deceive the Empire, they had done so while developing technologies that rivaled or perhaps even surpassed their own in some areas. It challenged everything they thought they knew about technological progression and species development. Order. The Emperor's psychic command cut through the chaos. We must decide how to respond to this situation. The humans have already proved more capable than we imagined, and we must assume they have other surprises waiting. Senator Realis. Realis stood, surprised at being singled out. Yes, most radiant one. Your ancestor, Senator Adres, was instrumental in establishing our protocols for integrating new species into the Empire. What would he advise in this situation? Realis felt the weight of every eye and sensory organ in the chamber turn toward him. He thought of the incense stick still burning at his ancestor's statue, and took a deep breath. Most Radiant One, honored assembly, he began, my ancestor believed in the power of understanding. If the humans have achieved this level of advancement while maintaining the appearance of primitive development, we must ask ourselves why. Why did they choose deception over diplomacy? Why did they wait until now to reveal themselves? And most importantly, what do their actions tell us about our own assumptions about civilizational development? A low murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. Realis continued, gaining confidence. I propose we attempt direct communication with these ships. Not as superiors speaking to primitives, but as equals addressing equals. Their deception suggests they fear us, and fear often breeds hostile action. If we can understand their motivations, perhaps we can prevent this situation from escalating into something none of us wish to contemplate. The Emperor's form pulsed with consideration. Your words carry wisdom, Senator. However, we must also consider the implications of their achievements. If one species could hide their true nature from us so effectively, could there be others? Could our entire understanding of technological progression be flawed? Before Realis could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the chamber. The central projection shifted to show new data, and the Emperor's psychic presence radiated concern. The human ships. The Emperor's thought voice was tight with tension, they've vanished. Vanished? Multiple voices asked at once. They were approaching the Nexus, the Emperor explained, and then they simply disappeared. No energy signature, no warp trace, nothing. It's as if they ceased to exist. Realis felt a chill run down his spine. The implications were staggering. Not only had the humans developed technology to bypass the Empire's containment, they had also mastered some form of cloaking that rendered them completely undetectable to Imperial sensors. The Emperor's form stabilized into a more rigid configuration, a sign of decisive action. This assembly is now an emergency war council. All routine matters are suspended. Senator Relis, you will head a special committee to analyze everything we know about human development and behavior. We must understand what we're dealing with. As the chamber erupted into activity once again, Relis exchanged glances with Tro. The small attendant's single eye was wide with worry. Sir, Tro whispered, what do you think the humans are planning? Relis looked back at the empty space in the projection where the human ships had been. I don't know, old friend. But I fear we're about to find out. The first rays of Morani's sun began to peek through the chamber's crystal dome, painting the scene in shades of gold and purple. It was dawn, but Relis couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the edge of a very long night. Shadows of deception. The archives of the Imperial Court stretched deeper into the planet's crust than any natural chasm. Senator Relis stood on a hovering platform that descended through the layers of history, each level marking a different era of the Empire's expansion. The air grew cooler as they dropped deeper, and the lighting shifted to accommodate species adapted to different wavelengths of radiation. How much further, Archivist? Relis asked the floating crystalline being beside him. The Archivist, a member of the silicon-based Lumini race, pulsed with soft blue light as it responded. The human records are stored in Section 47 Beta, Senator. Recent acquisitions, relatively speaking. Though I must say, your clearance request was most unusual. No one has accessed the original containment protocols in decades. Tro, standing close to Relis's legs, shivered slightly. Sir, do you really think the answers we seek will be found in such old data? Sometimes, Tro, the beginning of a story tells you more than its middle. Relis adjusted his ceremonial robes, now supplemented with the golden sash that marked him as head of the Emergency Response Committee. The Emperor wants answers about how the humans deceived us. I suspect our first mistakes were made right at the start. The platform came to a smooth stop beside a vast chamber filled with crystalline data structures. Each crystal contained thousands of years of recorded history, observations, and analysis. The archivist guided them through the geometric forest until they reached a relatively small section marked with Earth's coordinates. Here we are, the archivist pulsed. The complete record of human observation and containment. Though I should warn you, there are some peculiarities in the data structure. Relis's interest sharpened. What kind of peculiarities? See for yourself. The archivist extended a crystalline appendage, interfacing with the nearest data structure. A holographic display materialized in the air before them, showing the initial discovery reports of Earth. As Relis began reading, his eyes narrowed. This can't be right. According to this, we had 3 different first contact protocols initiated with Earth, by 3 different survey teams, in the same standard year. Precisely, the archivist's light patterns shifted to indicate concern. Each team apparently had no knowledge of the others. Each reported Earth as a new discovery. The contradictions weren't noticed until after the containment protocols were enacted. Relis began accessing more records, his 4 arms moving rapidly through different data streams. The more he read, the more his concern grew. Tro, are you seeing this? The atmospheric composition readings from the same time periods don't match. The population estimates vary by billions. Even the continental configurations show subtle differences. Could the data crystals be corrupted? Tro suggested. The archivist pulsed with indignation. Impossible. Our storage methods are perfect. What you're seeing is what was actually recorded. Relis stepped back from the display, his mind racing. Or what we were meant to record. Archivist, I need access to the original sensor logs from the survey ships themselves. Those would be in deep storage, the archivist hesitated. And technically, they're classified above your current clearance level. Relis pulled out a small crystalline disc bearing the Emperor's seal. Will this help? The archivist's light dimmed momentarily as it processed the authentication. Indeed. Follow me. They moved deeper into the archive, past sections that hadn't been accessed in millennia. The temperature dropped further, and Dro pulled his vest tighter around his round body. Finally, they reached a sealed chamber that hummed with preservation energy. The original logs are stored here, the archivist explained. But I must warn you, the data format is quite ancient. It may take some time to convert it for modern viewing. We have time, Relis said, though he knew it wasn't entirely true. The human ships were still out there somewhere, their intentions unknown. But rushing through this investigation would only lead to more mistakes. As the archivist began the conversion process, Relis received an urgent communication through his neural implant. The Emperor was calling an emergency session of his committee. Dro, stay here with the archivist. Begin analyzing the data as soon as it's converted. I need to know everything about those original survey missions, crew manifests, flight paths, sensor configurations, everything. Yes, Senator. But what are you thinking? Relis was already moving toward the platform. I'm thinking we weren't the only ones doing the observing 30 years ago. And I'm thinking some of our observers might not have been working for us. The journey back to the surface seemed to take forever, even though the platform was moving at maximum speed. Relis used the time to review what they discovered. 3 simultaneous first contact protocols, each reporting slightly different data about Earth. It was as if they'd been observing 3 different versions of the same planet. When he reached the emergency session chamber, he found it already full. Representatives from the military, scientific, and diplomatic corps were present, along with his fellow committee members. The Emperor's presence filled the room like a storm cloud. Senator Relis, the Emperor's thoughts touched his mind. We have a development. Show him. A hologram appeared in the center of the chamber, showing one of the human ships. But something was wrong with the image. It seemed to shift and blur, as if the light itself couldn't decide what it was seeing. This was captured by a long-range sentinel near the Nexus, explained Admiral Koros, a massive aquatic being suspended in a gravity-nullifying field. Watch what happens. The image suddenly split, showing the same ship in 3 slightly different configurations. Then, just as quickly, the images merged back into one before disappearing completely. What are we looking at? Relis asked, though he was beginning to form a terrible suspicion. Quantum superposition on a macroscopic scale, said Chief Scientist Vexra, her insectoid mandibles clicking with excitement. The humans aren't just hiding their ships, they're existing in multiple states simultaneously. That's why our containment fields failed. You can't contain something that exists in several realities at once. The implications hit Relis like a physical blow. The survey records, they weren't recording different versions of Earth. They were recording the same Earth existing in different quantum states. The Emperor's form pulsed with concern. If this is true, then the containment protocols never had a chance of succeeding. The humans were beyond our level of technology before we ever found them. But why maintain the deception? Why allow us to believe we were containing them? Before anyone could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the chamber. The hologram display shifted to show dozens of new contacts appearing near Imperial worlds. The human ships hadn't disappeared, they had replicated. By the ancestors, Admiral Koros breathed. They're everywhere. Relis watched as more and more signals appeared. The humans hadn't just broken containment, they had rendered the very concept meaningless. And now, the Empire faced a species that had not only surpassed their technological understanding but had done so in ways they hadn't even known were possible. His neural implant chimed with an urgent message from Dro, Senator, you need to see this. The survey ship crews, they weren't ours. The logs show quantum signatures we've never seen before. I think the humans have been part of the Empire all along. Just not this version of it. The Emperor's presence darkened the chamber. Senator Relis, explain. Relis took a deep breath. Most Radiant One, I believe we've discovered something far more significant than a containment breach. The humans aren't just a species that developed differently than we expected. They're a species that has learned to exist in multiple timelines simultaneously. And 30 years ago, they didn't just discover us. He looked up at the hologram showing the multiplying ships. They came here deliberately, from another quantum reality. We thought we were containing them, but they were actually studying us. And now, for some reason, they've decided to reveal themselves. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. They hadn't been the observers, they had been the observed. And now, the true observers had decided to step out of the shadows. The question is, Relis continued, what did they learn about us? And what do they plan to do with that knowledge? The Emperor's form stabilized into a rigid configuration that Relis had never seen before. Was it fear? Or recognition? Call an immediate session of the full Imperial Court, the Emperor commanded. All members, all species. No exceptions. We need to know if any others have seen these quantum signatures before. Because if the humans have been watching us from parallel realities, then we have to ask ourselves, Relis finished, how many other species have been doing the same thing? As the chamber erupted into activity, Relis couldn't help but wonder, had the Empire's careful system of technological progression and species containment been nothing but an elaborate facade? And if so, what was really out there in the darkness between the stars? The answers, he suspected, would shake the Empire to its foundations. Echoes of truth. The full Imperial Court hadn't convened in over 3 centuries. The last time was during the Nexus Crisis, when a chain reaction in the gate network threatened to tear apart the fabric of spacetime itself. Now, as Senator Relis stood in the Grand Assembly chamber, he couldn't help but think this situation might be even more serious. Species from every corner of the Empire filled the vast space. Some had traveled so far that their representatives looked noticeably older than when they'd begun their journeys, even with the time dilation effects of the gates. The chamber had been modified to accommodate them all, atmosphere barriers separated different environmental needs, gravity projectors created hundreds of distinct zones, and translation matrices hummed as they processed thousands of languages simultaneously. The full court hasn't gathered like this since the time of understanding, Dro whispered, his single eye wide as he took in the spectacular scene. Relis nodded. And even then, there weren't this many member species. He looked up at the Emperor's dais, where the ancient being's form seemed more agitated than usual, shifting between states faster than ever before. The findings from the archives had spread quickly through the emergency committee, and now every species present knew the truth, or at least, part of it. The humans hadn't just developed advanced technology in secret, they had mastered the ability to exist across multiple quantum realities simultaneously. More disturbing still was the possibility that other species might have achieved the same feat. A psychic pulse from the Emperor brought immediate silence to the chamber. Honored representatives, the Emperor's thoughts reached every mind present, we face a moment unprecedented in our history. The humans have not only breached containment but have revealed capabilities that challenge our fundamental understanding of reality itself. But before we address their current actions, we must first understand our past. Are there any among you who recognize these quantum signatures? The Emperor projected the data from the archive into the center of the chamber, the overlapping quantum states, the multiple timeline signatures, the evidence of reality manipulation on a cosmic scale. For a long moment, there was silence. Then, from the aquatic section, a representative of the Meridian Collective moved forward. Their water-filled environment bubble rippled with bioluminescent patterns. We have seen these patterns before, the Meridian's thoughts carried uncertainty. In our deepest archives, there are records from before our joining of the Empire. We thought they were corruption in the data, mathematical anomalies from our early quantum experiments. But now, before they could continue, a representative of the Crystalline Axthor Federation floated forward. Our people have similar records. Quantum echoes that didn't match any known natural phenomena. We dismissed them as measurement errors. One by one, more species came forward. Each had their own stories of mysterious quantum signatures, unexplained technological anomalies, and data that had been dismissed or buried. As Relus listened, a pattern began to emerge. Most Radiant One, he stood, addressing the Emperor directly. These reports all share a common element. They all occurred just before each species was contacted by the Empire. The Emperor's form pulsed with intense energy. Explain your thinking, Senator. These quantum signatures, they're not just evidence of advanced technology. They're evidence of observation. The humans weren't the only ones studying us, they were just the first to let us catch them doing it. The chamber erupted in shocked reactions. The Emperor's presence expanded, demanding order. If what you suggest is true, the Emperor's thoughts carried a weight Relus had never felt before, then our entire understanding of species development and technological progression is exactly what they wanted us to believe. A new voice cut through the chamber. A voice that wasn't carried by the translation matrix. A human voice. Every being in the chamber turned toward its source. There, in the center of the assembly, a figure had appeared. It was humanoid, wearing what appeared to be a simple gray suit. But as Relus looked closer, he realized the figure wasn't quite solid. It seemed to exist in several places at once, its edges blurring and shifting as if it was simultaneously present in multiple realities. My name is Dr. Sarah Chen, the figure said, her voice somehow perfectly understandable to every species present. I represent the human quantum collective. And yes, we've been watching. We all have. The Emperor's form stabilized into a tight, concentrated point of energy. Explain yourself, human. How did you enter this chamber? Dr. Chen smiled, her form flickering between several slightly different versions of herself. We've always been here. In fact, we're having this conversation in several thousand different quantum realities simultaneously right now. We've just decided it's time to let you perceive us in all of them. Relus stepped forward, his diplomatic training taking over despite his shock. Why now? Why maintain the illusion of being a primitive species for so long? Because, Senator Relus, your empire needed to be tested. Dr. Chen's form split into 3 distinct versions, each speaking in turn. The galaxy is full of species that have mastered quantum engineering, dimensional manipulation, and reality shifting. We needed to know if your empire could be trusted with that knowledge. Tested? The Emperor's thoughts carried a note of indignation. We have maintained peace across thousands of worlds for millennia. Yes, all 3 versions of Dr. Chen spoke in unison, you have. Through strict control of technological development, through carefully managed containment protocols, through a rigid system of advancement that you imposed on every species you encountered. But that's not how the universe actually works. She gestured, and the air around them seemed to shimmer. Suddenly, Relus could see them, quantum shadows of other beings throughout the chamber. Representatives of species he had never seen before, all existing in parallel with the known members of the Empire. There are countless civilizations that developed differently than your approved path, Dr. Chen continued. Species that achieved quantum mastery before planetary unification. Civilizations that learned to shift between realities before they learned to split the atom. We needed to know how you would react to a species that didn't fit your model. And what have you concluded? Relus asked, his heart's pounding in his chest. Dr. Chen's forms merged back into one, but now she seemed more solid, more present in their primary reality. That's why we're here. The quantum barrier between realities is weakening. Soon, contact between quantum-capable civilizations will be inevitable. The Empire needs to be prepared. The chamber exploded into chaos as representatives tried to process this information. The Emperor's presence expanded, filling the space with calming energy. You speak of other civilizations. The Emperor's thoughts were focused entirely on Dr. Chen. How many? More than you can imagine, she replied. And they're all watching this conversation right now, across countless quantum realities. Your empire stands at a crossroads. You can either adapt to a universe far more complex and interconnected than you believed, or you can cling to your old models and be left behind as the quantum barrier falls. Relis felt a sudden shift in the Emperor's presence, not fear or anger, but recognition. You're not here to challenge the Empire, he realized aloud. You're here to warn us. Dr. Chen nodded, her form flickering between realities again. Something is coming, Senator. Something that exists outside of quantum reality itself. All of our civilizations, across all our quantum states, have detected it. We need the Empire's help to face it. But first, you need to understand what you're really part of. She raised her hand, and the center of the chamber filled with a hologram unlike anything Relis had ever seen. It showed not just their galaxy, but countless versions of it, all interconnected by threads of quantum probability. This is the true map of civilization, she said. Not just in space, but across all possible realities. And somewhere in the space between those realities, something is stirring. Something that threatens not just one universe, but all of them. The Emperor's form expanded to its full size, towering over the assembly. You offer us knowledge of true reality, but demand we abandon our most fundamental beliefs about civilization and progress. Why should we trust you? Because you already have, Dr. Chen smiled. In thousands of other quantum realities, this conversation is going very differently. In some, it leads to war. In others, to immediate alliance. In a few, to the collapse of the Empire itself. But in this reality, the one where you chose to hear us out, where Senator Relis thought to check the original survey records, where the Empire showed it could adapt, we believe we've found a timeline that gives us all the best chance of survival. She turned to address the entire assembly. The quantum barrier will fail within 1 standard year. When it does, every version of every civilization will become aware of each other. The shock will shake the foundations of every society in every reality. We need the Empire's organizational capability, its diplomatic experience, its ability to maintain order across vast distances. But first, you need to understand what's really out there. As if on cue, more figures began to appear in the chamber, representatives from quantum-capable civilizations across multiple realities. Each existed in several states at once, their forms shifting and changing as they moved through quantum possibilities. Relis looked around the chamber, seeing the shock and wonder on the faces of his fellow representatives. The Empire had prided itself on bringing order to the galaxy, on guiding species toward a specific path of development. Now they learned that path was just one of countless possibilities. But as he watched the quantum representatives interact with the Imperial Court, he realized something else: this was an opportunity. The Empire had always sought to unite species across space. Now they had the chance to unite them across reality itself. The Emperor's thoughts touched his mind privately. Senator Relis, your ancestor faced a similar moment when he helped establish our protocols for integrating new species. What would he advise now? Relis looked up at his ancestor's statue, still visible in the grand hallway outside. He would say that true wisdom lies not in clinging to old knowledge, but in being willing to learn new truths. Even if those truths change everything we thought we knew. The Emperor's form stabilized, and Relis sensed a decision had been made. The next few moments would determine not just the future of the Empire, but the future of countless realities. The quantum barrier was failing, and reality itself was about to become far more complicated than anyone, in any universe, had imagined. Convergence point. The Imperial Palace's Strategic Command Center had never been this crowded. 3 weeks had passed since the quantum civilizations revealed themselves to the Empire, and the massive chamber now housed representatives from dozens of realities, their forms shifting and overlapping as they worked to prepare for the coming crisis. Senator Relis stood before a holographic display that showed the quantum barrier's degradation across multiple timelines. Dr. Chen's quantum shadow stood beside him, her form occasionally splitting into parallel versions as she explained the data. "The decay is accelerating," she said, her voices overlapping slightly. "We're detecting reality fractures in sectors that should have been stable for another 6 months." Relis studied the patterns, his diplomatic training struggling to adapt to this new paradigm of multidimensional politics. "These fractures, they're not random, are they?" "No," Dr. Chen's forms merged into one as she focused on a particular sector. "They're being caused by something. Or someone. We're detecting patterns that suggest deliberate manipulation of the quantum substrate itself." The Emperor's presence filled the chamber, causing the quantum representatives to flicker more rapidly between states. "Show us." The hologram expanded, revealing a complex network of reality fractures spreading across the galaxy. But unlike the natural degradation they'd been monitoring, these new patterns formed geometric shapes, perfect hexagons that seemed to transcend quantum states. "We're calling them null spaces," Dr. Chen explained. "Areas where quantum probability itself seems to be breaking down. It's as if something is eating reality." Zhou, who had been quietly taking notes nearby, dropped his datapad. "Eating reality? Is that even possible?" "Theoretically, no," a new voice joined the conversation. A representative of the quantum collective of axiomatic intelligences stepped forward, their form a constantly shifting mathematical equation given visual form. "Reality cannot be destroyed, only transformed. But these null spaces appear to be removing sections of spacetime from the quantum probability matrix entirely." The Emperor's form contracted to a tight point of energy, a sign of intense concentration. "You've seen this before." It wasn't a question. The quantum representatives exchanged looks across multiple realities. "Yes," Dr. Chen admitted. "In other timeline clusters, we've detected similar phenomena. Always preceded by the weakening of quantum barriers, always following the same geometric patterns. But we've never been able to observe what happens next." "Why not?" Relis asked, though he feared he knew the answer. "Because in every timeline where the patterns reached completion, that entire reality cluster simply vanished. Along with every version of every civilization within it." The chamber fell silent, even the quantum flickering seemed to slow for a moment. "How long?" the Emperor demanded. Dr. Chen's form split into 3 versions, each checking different data streams. "At the current rate of degradation, 3 weeks. Maybe less." Relis felt his heart skip a beat. 3 weeks until what exactly? "Until the null spaces in this reality cluster reach critical geometric alignment. After that." All 3 versions of Dr. Chen shrugged simultaneously. "We don't know. No one has ever survived to report what happens." The Emperor's presence expanded suddenly, filling the chamber with urgent energy. "Then we must evacuate. Move our civilizations to stable reality clusters." "It wouldn't help," the axiomatic intelligence interrupted, their mathematical form growing more complex with agitation. "The null spaces follow quantum probability lines. Once a reality cluster is targeted, every possible version of it is affected. There is nowhere to run." Relis stepped closer to the hologram, studying the geometric patterns. Something about them seemed familiar. "These patterns," he said slowly, "they remind me of something in the Imperial archives." "Zhou, do you still have access to those original survey files?" Zhou quickly retrieved his backup datapad and began searching. "Yes, Senator. But what are we looking for?" "The quantum signatures we found in the original Earth surveys. The ones we thought were data corruption." Relis turned to Dr. Chen. "You said humans weren't the only ones studying us. Who else was watching?" Dr. Chen's forms flickered rapidly. Many quantum civilizations observed the empire over the millennia. We compared notes, evaluated your development. No, Relus interrupted. Not the quantum civilizations. Something else was watching. Something that left traces in our oldest records. Something that's been planning this for a very long time. The Emperor's presence sharpened with sudden understanding. The precursors. Every quantum representative in the chamber stopped flickering for a moment, their forms stabilizing in shock. That's impossible, Dr. Chen whispered, her forms merging into one solid image. The precursors are a myth. Stories told by quantum civilizations about beings that existed before the divergence of realities. Check your oldest records, the Emperor's thoughts carried urgent authority. All of you. Look for geometric patterns matching these null spaces. The quantum representatives began accessing data across multiple realities, their forms blurring as they processed information at quantum speeds. Relus watched as their expressions changed from skepticism to concern to outright fear. By all that exists, the axiomatic intelligence's form became almost incomprehensible with agitation. The patterns are there. In every reality, in the oldest records of every civilization. These aren't random reality fractures. They're activation sequences. Activation sequences for what? Zhou asked, his single eye wide with fear. Before anyone could respond, alarms began blaring across every reality simultaneously. The hologram display flickered and changed, showing new data that made even the quantum representatives step back in shock. The null spaces were moving. The geometric patterns were rotating, aligning across dimensions in ways that shouldn't have been possible. And at the center of each hexagonal pattern, something was beginning to emerge. They're not eating reality, Relus realized, his voice barely a whisper. They're transforming it. Creating spaces where their physics can exist in our universe. Dr. Chen's form split into dozens of versions, each checking different data streams. Multiple emergence points detected across all realities. The null spaces are converging on populated systems first. They're not random at all, they're targeting conscious civilizations. The Emperor's form expanded to its full size, power radiating from every quantum state. How do we stop them? We can't, the axiomatic intelligence responded. Not directly. These beings exist outside of quantum reality itself. Our weapons, our technology, even our quantum manipulation abilities would be useless against them. Relus stared at the hologram, watching as more and more systems fell within the geometric patterns. Then something caught his eye, a subtle fluctuation in the pattern near a particular system. There, he pointed. That disruption in the pattern. What's causing it? Dr. Chen's forms converged on the data. That's impossible. The pattern is being disrupted by conscious observation itself. The more beings that perceive and understand the pattern, the less stable it becomes. The Emperor's presence pulsed with sudden hope. Then we have a weapon after all. Consciousness itself. Relus looked up at the ancient being. The Empire's greatest strength has always been its ability to unite different species, different ways of thinking. Now we need to unite different realities. A convergence of consciousness across quantum states, the axiomatic intelligence's form stabilized into a clear geometric shape. It's never been attempted on this scale. We don't have a choice, Dr. Chen said, her form becoming more solid than ever. We have 3 weeks to unite every conscious being in every reality cluster. To make them understand what's happening. To make them see. The Emperor's presence touched every mind in the chamber. Then we begin now. Senator Relus, coordinate with the quantum civilizations. We need to establish communication across all realities immediately. Every being in every universe needs to understand what we're facing. As the chamber erupted into activity, Relus felt the weight of history pressing down on him. The Empire had spent millennia carefully controlling the development of species, maintaining order through structure and protocol. Now their only hope lay in doing the opposite, in sharing everything they knew with everyone, everywhere, all at once. The quantum barrier was failing, ancient beings were emerging from beyond reality itself, and the only weapon they had was consciousness itself. It would take the largest cooperative effort in the history of any reality to have even a chance of survival. And they had 3 weeks to make it happen. The Reality Nexus. The great gates of every imperial world stood active simultaneously, their surfaces crackling with unprecedented levels of psychic energy. What had once been carefully controlled passages between worlds now served as quantum amplifiers, broadcasting a unified message across millions of realities. Senator Relis stood before the gates on Morani, watching as the Scion escorts pushed themselves beyond all known limits. The consciousness convergence is at 70%, Dro reported, monitoring data streams from across quantum states. But the null spaces are still expanding. Dr. Chen's quantum shadow flickered beside them, her form less stable than ever as she divided her attention across countless realities. We need at least 90% convergence to create a meaningful disruption in the emergence patterns. How many species are still resistant? Too many, Relis replied, his heart's heavy. Despite their best efforts over the past 3 weeks, some civilizations, both imperial and quantum, refused to participate in the united consciousness effort. Some didn't believe the threat was real. Others feared the sharing of minds would destroy their cultural identity. A few simply couldn't comprehend existence beyond their own quantum state. The Emperor's presence filled the space around them, more focused than Relis had ever felt it. Show me the latest emergence data. A hologram materialized, showing the geometric patterns of null spaces spreading across multiple realities. The hexagonal formations were almost complete, and at their centers, something was taking form, shapes that seemed to fold through dimensions that shouldn't exist, entities that hurt the mind to perceive. The precursors aren't just emerging, the Emperor's thoughts carried a note of revelation. They're reconstructing their original reality, the one that existed before quantum divergence created multiple timelines. But that would mean, Relis started. The end of free will itself, Dr. Chen finished, her forms merging in grim understanding. In their reality, there are no quantum states, no probability. Everything follows a single, predetermined path. Alarms began blaring across every reality simultaneously. The geometric patterns were reaching completion, and the spaces between them were beginning to fold. Full emergence in 17 minutes, Dro announced, his single eye wide with terror. The patterns are stabilizing faster than predicted. Relis stared at the hologram, watching reality itself begin to bend and break. Then something caught his attention, a subtle fluctuation in one of the patterns. There, he pointed. That distortion. It's different from the consciousness disruptions we've been creating. Dr. Chen's form split apart, analyzing the data. He's right. This is something else. Something older. The Emperor's presence contracted suddenly. The gates. What about them? Relis asked. We've been using them wrong, the Emperor's thoughts raced. We thought they were teleporters, ways to move between worlds. But the Scions, they showed us how to build them. They gave us the technology freely. Understanding dawned across multiple realities. The gates aren't for transportation, Dr. Chen whispered. They're quantum stabilizers. The Scions built them to prevent exactly what's happening now. But why didn't they tell us? Dro asked. Because knowledge shapes reality, the Emperor replied. If we had known their true purpose, we would have used them differently. Our consciousness would have affected their function. They had to let us believe they were simply tools for empire building. Relis stepped closer to the nearest gate, studying its ancient symbols with new eyes. The Scions knew this was coming. They've been preparing for it for millennia, spreading the gates across thousands of worlds, creating a network of quantum stabilization points. But it's not enough, Dr. Chen's forms blurred with agitation. The gates alone can't generate enough stability to prevent the emergence. That's why we need the consciousness convergence. No, Relis said slowly, an impossible idea taking shape in his mind. We don't need to prevent the emergence. We need to control it. The Emperor's presence sharpened. Explain. The gates aren't just stabilizers, they're focal points for consciousness itself. That's why they need scion escorts, beings trained to handle the psychic strain of quantum manipulation. What if we used them not to resist the emergence, but to guide it? Guide it where? Tro asked. Into us. Dr. Chen's form suddenly stabilized as she grasped the concept. We create our own convergence point. A space where our reality and theirs can coexist. The Emperor's form expanded dramatically. The Nexus. The quantum hub that connects all imperial worlds. If we redirect all gate energy there, we create a controlled point of emergence, Relis finished. Instead of letting the precursors reconstruct their reality everywhere at once, we give them one point of contact. And then what? Tro demanded. We'll still be facing beings from beyond quantum reality itself. But we'll be facing them on our terms, Dr. Chen said, her form splitting into hundreds of versions as she began sending the plan across realities. In a space we control, with the combined consciousness of trillions of beings focused on a single point. Warning signals blared again. The geometric patterns were nearly complete. 12 minutes to full emergence, Tro reported. The Emperor's presence touched every mind connected to the network. There is no time for debate. All gates must divert full power to the Nexus immediately. Every scion, every psychically capable being, must focus their consciousness on the convergence point. Relis felt the change immediately as the gate's energy shifted. The air itself seemed to thicken with psychic power as trillions of minds across countless realities turned their attention to a single point in spacetime. The Nexus, visible from Morani as a distant point of light, began to glow brighter. The quantum shadows of other realities became more visible as the barriers between states thinned. The precursors are responding, Dr. Chen reported, her forms flickering rapidly. The geometric patterns are shifting, redirecting toward the Nexus. 9 minutes to emergence. Relis watched as reality itself seemed to bend around the Nexus. The quantum shadows of other timelines weren't just visible now, they were merging, overlapping, creating a space where all possibilities existed simultaneously. Consciousness convergence at 85%, Tro called out. 90, 93. The geometric patterns locked onto the Nexus, their hexagonal forms rotating through impossible dimensions. At their center, something began to take shape, a presence vast beyond comprehension, ancient beyond time itself. They're here, the Emperor's thoughts echoed across all realities. The being that emerged defied description. It existed in all quantum states simultaneously while somehow remaining outside them all. Its form seemed to fold through dimensions that shouldn't exist, its consciousness vast enough to encompass entire timeline clusters. And you would attempt to shape our emergence? The thought wasn't words so much as concepts forced directly into every consciousness observing the event. The being's attention fell upon them with the weight of epochs. We would attempt to understand, Relis found himself speaking, his voice carrying across quantum states through the gate network. To find a way for both our realities to coexist. Impossible. Quantum reality is an aberration. A mistake in the pattern. It must be corrected. No, the Emperor's presence expanded to match the ancient being's attention. Quantum reality is evolution. It is the universe exploring all possibilities, growing, learning. What you see as a mistake, we see as potential. The being's form shifted, its attention fragmenting across multiple states as it analyzed their words. Potential for chaos. For disorder. For suffering. And for joy, Dr. Chen's quantum shadows spoke in unison. For discovery. For change. For growth. More precursors were emerging now, their forms filling the space around the nexus. But something was different. The geometric patterns weren't expanding anymore. The combined consciousness of trillions of beings, focused through the gate network, was holding them in check. You cannot maintain this containment forever. We don't want to contain you, Relis said, understanding flowing through him from the unified consciousness of countless beings. We want to show you something you've never seen before, the beauty of uncertainty. Through the gate network, through the unified minds of trillions of beings across millions of realities, they shared everything. Every quantum possibility, every choice, every moment of discovery and wonder and growth. The joy of free will, the power of change, the endless potential of multiple futures. The precursors' forms flickered, their patterns shifting as they processed this flood of experience. For beings that had existed in a reality of absolute certainty, the concept of quantum probability was simultaneously terrifying and fascinating. This is not the correction we sought. But perhaps it is a correction nonetheless. The geometric patterns began to shift again, but not in the rigid forms of before. They flowed, adapted, creating spaces where quantum reality and singular certainty could coexist. We will observe, learn, understand. The emergence stopped. The null spaces stabilized, becoming windows between realities rather than attempts to overwrite them. The precursors remained, but as observers rather than invaders. Through the gate network, Relis felt the relief and joy of trillions of beings across countless realities. They had done it. Not through weapons or technology or power, but through understanding. Through the simple act of sharing consciousness across quantum states, they had shown beings from beyond reality itself the value of uncertainty. The Emperor's presence touched his mind privately. Your ancestor would be proud, Senator. You found a way to unite not just different species, but different realities. Relis looked up at the nexus, now a swirling quantum aurora where multiple states of reality danced together. We all did it together. Every consciousness, every choice, every possibility, they all mattered. And now? Dro asked, his single eye reflecting the quantum light show above. Now we learn, Dr. Chen's form stabilized into a single, solid version. We have access to knowledge from beyond quantum reality itself. The precursors will share their understanding of the fundamental nature of existence, and will share our understanding of its infinite possibilities. The Empire will need to change, the Emperor's thoughts reached across all realities. No more containment protocols, no more rigid paths of development. Every species, in every reality, must be free to find their own way. Relis smiled, watching as the quantum shadows of countless civilizations mingled around the nexus. That's what the humans were trying to show us all along, wasn't it? That there's no single right path to advancement. That diversity, of species, of civilizations, of realities, is strength. The gates hummed with power, maintaining the quantum stability that allowed multiple states of reality to coexist. Above them all, the precursors watched and learned, their ancient certainty gradually giving way to curiosity about the infinite possibilities that quantum reality represented. It was the dawn of a new age, not just for the Empire, but for reality itself. An age where certainty and probability would dance together, where consciousness could bridge the gap between quantum states, and where every possibility held the potential for growth and understanding. The universe, in all its infinite variations, continued to evolve.